Hey, one more thing before you go. What do you do when you have 1,000 stories or more to tell? The foundation from a college radio program and love to make people laugh. Well, you create a stream of conscious dialogue that continues that conversation and more. Stay tuned. We're going to talk to one of the forerunners of online media who's going to share his journey with us. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. My guest in this episode is a true pioneer of online media. He's a man who's not only produced over 1,500 shows, but also been a guest on more than 30 other shows. He's a legend in the world of podcasting and online content creation. The co-host of staticradio.com. It's a comedy show that's been on the airwaves for an incredible 24 years, working on 25. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Bob Lamont.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm absolutely wonderful. How are you, Bob?
I'm good. It's good to be here today. It's a nice day. I'm in St. Louis. It's a little bit overcast, but otherwise, I'd say enjoyable.
Enjoyable works. I live in Arizona in the Phoenix area. As you know, we've been breaking records with this incredible heat.
Yeah.
We finally woke up this morning to 58 degrees because we live north of Phoenix. Finally woke up to 58 degrees instead of 80 degrees. So, yeah, it's enjoyable here too.
That's good. Yeah, 58. They flipped it on you. It's the dyslexic weather in Arizona now. 58 rather than 85.
Oh, it's been, I grew up in Colorado. So we lived up in the mountains where about 800 to 500 feet where it snowed in June, occasionally in July, the first week of July. And we moved to Arizona. It was a complete shift in everything. In fact, it was so hot that we waited to unload the truck and the car till the next morning. And we went out and the television was melted and the VCR was melted in the back seat of the car.
Oh, no, that's terrible. That's incredibly hot. I don't think I've ever witnessed anything like that. A long time ago, I worked at a video store, and back when there was video stores before streaming, and we used to have people would melt their video cassettes in the back of the windows of their cars or the front windows, and I thought it's interesting. I thought it was fascinating. So I took a video cassette that was going to get thrown away or something, and I threw it in the front of my car. It never melted. I could never get it to melt.
Really?
Other people would bring them in, but I don't know if it was just like the strongest video cassette ever made or something. I don't know, but
or it was up there for months.
Yeah, I left it on there. It rattled around the dashboard, but it never melted. I was like, I was really hoping, to be honest with you. But
my sister had told us when we got here, so we're too tired. We want to just unload everything in the morning. She said, I don't know if I'd do that. I don't know if I'd wait.
Yeah, really.
We went out, opened the door, and looked at the TV and the VCR. She said, "We're leaving."
You better get the meltable stuff in.
We're like out of here.
I wonder what Amazon does because everything sits out in trucks.
We don't usually have a problem unless we're ordering something like protein bars or something that can melt or something on food type stuff, candy and things like that. And theoretically, it's nice because on Prime, at least they get it here in a day or two. Anything longer than that, it'll show up to the door melted.
That's
melted.
Great. Yeah, that's great. I'm sure the DoorDash people are having a heyday. I want a couple of milkshakes. Yeah, good luck with that.
It's fun, but we love October. Typically, October is like our free month. We get in, okay, and everything's cooled down now. They've turned the heat down. Whoever's in charge upstairs of the thermometer finally turns it down. But we've had a number of 100-degree days here in October as well. So I think it's changing across the country as well, across the world actually. I mean,
right.
But I'm not looking forward to it here.
Shifting of temperatures is a annual thing. Yeah.
Kind of a pain.
But I don't know. I've been to Phoenix. I was in the airport once, and I guess I drove through once. Unfortunately, I never stayed in Phoenix. I stayed in Flagstaff one time.
Flagstaff's beautiful.
Yeah, I love
Flagstaff is
Flagstaff.
Flagstaff is kind of where we lived in Woodland Park, Colorado, which is is like Flagstaff, a lot like Flagstaff, but 8,500 feet. So you're kind
Mhm.
of there's a similarity there. So we went from that down here to the desert. So,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I got as I told you before we started here, I found surgeons down here that were like amazing surgeons that helped me get out of my wheelchair. So
Right.
it's kind of a payoff, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I got because healthcare is one of those things that seems like it should be fairly available,
Yeah,
but it's not.
but it's not.
And it's not in a lot of places. I mean, you have to go. Obviously, Phoenix is a huge, uh, you know, area, huge city, and so forth. On par with Chicago and
Yeah,
Boston and all these places. And so that's where you have to go because that's where the people are that can do it. They're not in. I live in St. Louis, and there's good hospitals here and so forth. But you go out into the wilds of Missouri, and there's nothing. So
nothing out there.
everybody comes to St. Louis or goes to Kansas City. I mean, there's stuff in the middle of the state, but it's not quite as specialized, I guess.
Yeah, I mean here, I mean I think part of because of what I had to have replaced, I think part of here is the fact that there's a huge snowbird community here and a huge
Mm-hmm.
retirement community here. So um, there's plenty of clients, we'll say,
Mm-hmm.
for the
Right. Yeah. The
doctors that
money.
are here.
The money's there.
Exactly, a lot of guinea
The
pigs.
patients are there, so the money's there. Yeah. The
Uh,
so do you so since you've been living there, then now do you get cold? Like, so it's 58. Like, where you like I got to put on a sweater, because
my
it's
uh,
acclimated.
Yeah, my sister will attest to the fact that when she'd come back to Colorado and it was 72 degrees and I'm in t-shirt and shorts, she's wearing a coat. And we used to laugh at her saying, what's the matter with you, man? It's like, this is nice. And
Yeah.
now we're that.
You've acclimated then, so now it's got to be above 80 before you feel like, oh yeah, it's nice
Yeah,
outside.
now it's nice. Yeah, 50
Yeah.
degrees, 60 degrees, we're freezing, turning the fire on. Yeah, it's
That's
kind of
why I
fun.
think here in the middle, we have both ends of it temperature wise, and so I'm pretty comfortable from like 80 down to 40, and then it gets cold.
And then it works. And we know one of the reasons we moved north of Phoenix because we're a little northwest. So it is a few degrees cooler, which is nice.
Mm.
But then what you have to do is go into Phoenix to get everything. So
Right. Yeah.
you're really still not out of it because if you got to go
Hmm.
someplace like, go get something, go to the grocery store, go to Whole Foods or whatever, then you got to drive into the heat. But
Mm.
it's between October, theoretically, between October and May, April, May, it's really nice down here because you can sit outside and have a nice lunch. It's 80 degrees, 75, 80 degrees. It's not too hot.
Hmm.
Um, and in the mornings, you still get the brisk mornings. So it's gotten down to freezing here before, at least where we're at, but not very
Hmm.
often. In fact, when I was wrapping my pipes a few times when it was getting down to freezing, I had neighbors going, "What are you doing?" I went, "This will prevent the pipes from freezing."
Right, burst pipe.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. Hey, anyway, I got a lot. There's so many questions. I'm stumbling over my words
Sure.
because there's so many things that you have been in this business. You're not just a podcaster. You're like an online media pioneer.
Yeah, that's.
Um,
I love that word. I don't know if I coined it or not, but I certainly put it out there. I like that term.
it's a great term. Obviously my age. I've never really divulged my age completely, but I'm at an age where, back when we played with rocks and sticks and things like that, we never imagined. I mean, you watch Star Trek and you can go, yeah, I want that, I want that, I want that. And you wanted the communicators, and you wanted the computer to talk to you, and you wanted,
Mhm.
you know, all that stuff. Or be able to, when they say bring it up on the front screen on Star Trek, here's them having a conversation, video conversation, so to speak,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
never
we're
dreamed,
pretty much there. Yeah.
but we're there.
Yeah, the computer talking coherently to you is not quite there yet, but the rest of it's pretty much there. I mean, they're trying with, if you read about all the AI stuff, they're really
Mhm.
trying to have that happen. But unfortunately, um, it's not even at the toddler stage on some of these aspects of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it'll be interesting though. I know and this is an aside, but I read an article about a young kid with autism, and how Siri, or no, how Alexa uh, changed his worldview. He was just, probably not even 10 years old or something, I think, from the article I recall. And kids with autism ask a lot of questions,
Yeah.
and it can be annoying. But they got one of the speakers for Alexa. Anyway, it would answer his questions all day long, and so it became
Oh.
like a life changing, kind of a, for the family. It was a changing situation, because now you could answer a few questions, and then you could kind of redirect and say, at the point when mom's like, I've had enough of talk about zebras or whatever, sent him over to the Alexa, and then eventually he just kind of went there on his own. And it's very, yeah. I mean, you were talking about with your health and so forth earlier.
Yeah.
It really flattens the curves on things for people, so that they uh, can have a place to be, rather than being on the fringes and on the outside.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. That's
it's
amazing.
interesting. Yeah, it's great. So I'm just an aside. Sorry.
Oh, no, no, that's great because I mean, I love talking about that kind of stuff. I think that, especially implementing it from that perspective, I think that, the
Yeah, no one
AIs.
would have thought. I mean, that's,
Exactly.
it,
Um,
that wasn't the goal of Amazon, was to help this kid feel better, but in the end, it did.
it did, and I'm sure that it gave him more self-confidence too, with
Right?
regard
Yeah.
to what he could achieve and where he could go with it, and being able to ask questions that he wanted to ask without fear of judgment or fear of
Hmm.
irritation, which is a brilliant opportunity to take
Right.
somebody's health journey to another level. Um,
Hmm.
I think that there are some great advances within that arena, and I think that back when I was a cop, we used to have to type our reports, and then before I left, we had gotten computers and we're working with computers, and that made life so much easier, even with report writing and stuff.
Hmm.
Now it seems like I can't live without. Well, we wouldn't be talking like this if I didn't have the digital
Right.
media right means to be able to
Right.
do it.
Exactly. True.
So it's an ever changing journey, but at the same time, I think the advantages are there for what an amazing. I'm going to look for that story because I think that I would like to reach out to those people and bring them on the show. I think that
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't remember the names or anything. I just remember reading about it. But yeah.
I can find it.
Yeah.
I'm a good investigator.
Well,
Yeah,
you
I got
got
a
some
good.
practice, that sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. I thought, in fact, I got some stuff I found in your closet. We'll hide that. We won't
Oh
talk
my
about that on the
goodness, I don't know
show.
if we want to talk about any of that. We'll see.
Let's talk about your
Ask the
journey.
question. Ask
That's
the
the
question,
question.
and I'll.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey. I mean, because obviously it's been an incredible one. You've been on the air for as long as you have. How'd you get started? What got you involved?
So yeah, the probably the big thing was, actually, my co-host Miles and I, we did a radio show in college together, and it really wasn't that much different than what we're still doing today. But in college, you get opportunities, and so we were doing the show, and then we both graduated and went on and got other work and so forth. But we were always like, hey, it was so much fun doing that show, and I was involved in technical uh, internet things at the time, kind of as a kind of as part of my work, but not as the majority of my work. And I have an interest in that area anyway. So I said, hey, we could keep doing that, except we'll do it online. And he said, yeah, okay. He's not very technical really, and so he's like, oh, you set it up, we'll do our show. So essentially, I got everything together. I got a book called How to Program HTML in 7 Days, and I read it and made the first website at that point. Because there wasn't any, CMS or anything, so there was no content management back in those days, and so made the website and we started recording. I had access to, at the time, what was called Real Audio, which nobody is going to remember.
I remember it.
Do you remember? Okay, it was a
I
Real
do.
Audio server, and so at the time those were really quite expensive. But because of my employment, I was able to access that, and we were able to post audio to the internet back in 1999. When there really wasn't a lot going on in that area. I mean, people would post because there was no MP3 standard at that point. There wasn't, there was some videos and stuff, but they're all postage stamp size kind of situation. And so it was fun. And so we just started doing it. And to be honest with you, I didn't think it would last, more than maybe a year or something. And I don't know, it's just been a connection. So, I mean, he's been my friend for a long time, and I describe the show sometimes as a 20 plus year conversation. We just, every week we connect and talk and tell stories, and it all goes from there. And it's been, quite fun, to do it. And, my hope is we continue to do it. Because we can. I mean, it's not, thank goodness it's not overly strenuous for me. So I'm very lazy. So this is easy for me to do. So, but that's how it all started. We used to play music in college, but because of Napster at that point in time, we didn't, because the original idea was just to do with a show like we did in college. But because of Napster, we just cut out the music and did a couple stories, and when we first started, it was only about maybe 10 or 15 minutes because of the space issues and all kinds of other issues that at the time were problems, but we've kind of come along pretty quickly to be in about a half hour format, and I tell a story, he tells a story, we try to crack each other up, and it goes from there. So that's that's kind of the origins of it.
Well, I'm going to be a little cliche. So you started partying in 1999 with this, and you're still doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just every week. I mean, it's kind of like one of those things where you're like, you set yourself a schedule, and I'm just like, every week we're going to talk. So we don't live anywhere near each other necessarily. And we never have since college. And so it was always a phone call before. And then we went from phone calls to Skype, and we went from Skype to the next thing and to the next thing. And then, nowadays we're using another kind of something similar to what you're using software wise. But yeah, it all started with phone calls, which is kind of funny because you and I talked about long distance earlier. So I had a weekly long distance charge calling to do the show basically. So
You're back in the olden days.
Yeah, way back in the last century, we'd had to pay to talk to people. Yeah,
Yeah, that was or buy a card. What do you call it? Like a phone card if you were out and about.
Card, yeah.
So you could call back home if you need to. Carry a cord and a dime with you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a funny story about a phone card if you want to hear about it. So
Absolutely.
I don't know if anybody wants to hear this, but so when I first started my employment, my boss he makes a copy of this, makes a copy of a copy, and it was a phone card, MCI phone card, I think is what it was. And he's like, if when you're because I travel, he's like, when you travel and you can use this, but don't overuse it because it's not mine. So he had somehow gotten somebody's a copy of some because you just type in the numbers, right? And so he got this phone card from somebody else and made a copy of it, and then I cut it down to the card size, and then made a copy for me. And so for years we were using, I don't even know whose phone card it was, but he's like, if you're out, you can use it in an emergency. You can make one call a day. And so somewhere in the history of things, there's somebody who like, where are all these calls coming from all these people?
Where's my money going?
That's right. Why am I paying for all these calls? And but it never stopped until basically the phone cards were out of vogue. So anyway, I don't know. I find that hilarious.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
Everybody's going, where's all my minutes, man? They cut off
never stopped. So
cut off in the middle of their phone call. I had minutes. I know I did. I knew I did. Oh, that's funny. Speaking of conversations, you guys were Static Radio was one of the first 50 podcasts on Adam Curry's original list. So like you were there in the very beginning. I mean, it coming in from the beginning of time, basically, because like when I started podcasting, there were 876,000 podcasts worldwide.
Yeah.
And I remember that because I speak at Podfest, and I have spoken at Podfest, a huge conference in regard to podcasting. And I give a presentation. I thought, well, when I started, how many were there? But now, when I had to do my last gig with them, and I was doing more research to update my research, there's 5.4 million podcasts worldwide now.
Really? I had no idea. I haven't looked it up.
That's
a lot.
Astounds me. 5.4 million podcasts. But you were there at the beginning.
Yeah. So it just so happened. So basically podcasting, it was right around 2003 is when the word got, coined. Curry and Dave Weiner coined the term podcasting. And we had been recording then since 99. So that's, 4 years or something like that. And I was listening to Adam Curry. He used to do a show called The Daily Source Code. And he would talk about other stuff. And then he would talk about this idea that him and Dave Weiner were working on. And so I had some email interactions whenever all this was happening because I was very curious about this, obviously. And so then he started keeping track once kind of the RSS enclosure got out into the wild. They kind of released it and so forth. I got a hold of code and we would hand code your RSS feed. And so I was hand coding an RSS feed, and we were in his list. So he had kept a little list back then, and it grew and grew from there. I've searched the internet several times, not over the last couple of years, trying to find it, but I think he got rid of it, or who knows what happened to it. But the funny thing about that list was, so then we were on there, and I think there was about 50 shows at that point in time when we jumped on, and so that's where I came up with that. I don't remember the exact number, to be honest with you, but I know it was not more than 50 at that time. And the reason I can remember is because there was two shows, and I don't even know I know one of them is still going, but I don't know the other one. So there was a thing called Soccer Girl and Keith and the Girl. And I always used to tell Miles, I'm like, I need to dump you and get a girl, because obviously that's really what is going to propel this thing. And that didn't happen, but we got added to the list somewhere by I think after Keith and the Girl was what I remember. And so then the what I think is it happens to this day. But the funny thing is then. iTunes didn't even have podcasts on it at that time. But when they did, I got a note from a person who was listening. They said, hey, do you know you're on iTunes? And I'm like, what do you mean I'm on iTunes? I didn't, do anything. Yeah, it's not my fault. And then, but sure enough, I looked and iTunes pretty much just gleaned Adam Curry's list and put it all on iTunes from whenever it first started up. And then, they had the PBS, public radio stuff and so forth, all kind of came on whenever they launched the podcasting in iTunes. And so that was kind of a wild situation. So, nowadays, I don't even know where we're at on any kind of charts or anything. But hey, we were pretty high on the chart back then because there was not that many people on it. So
Well, theoretically,
we got lucky with that. So
theoretically, as a podcaster, you're my grandpa.
yeah, exactly. But I think it's funny that even to this day, so you'll find our show on all these aggregators, right? So iHeartRadio and Spotify and everything. There's only one out of all these years. There's only one group that has ever asked if they could put our show on their service. I'll see if you can guess the group. And it's major, so it's a large one.
Well, there's let me see, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, Castbox. Of course, iTunes we've already mentioned that one.
Yeah, I already mentioned that one. They stole that a long time ago. Yeah.
Stole a long time ago. So when you think of Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, Stitcher, Castbox, there's a radio.fm.
I think so.
I think so. And my brain can't think past that at the moment.
That's okay. You're in the. You want to pick one of those because it's one of those.
Probably Stitcher or Amazon.
It was Amazon. Amazon sent me an email and they said, "Do you mind if we have you on the service? And if you're okay with it, would you fill out this form?" But nobody else ever even asked. They just do it, and then I find out later. I'm not mad about it or anything, but it just goes to show you kind of the interesting nature of putting things on the internet and how they'll travel. Is you just never know where they're going to be. I mean, it's I'm always surprised at where the show turns up or things turn up. It's just amazing how it travels,
and worldwide.
It's just crazy.
Worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide. Yeah.
That's
I got some notification that we were popular on something in Ireland, and I'm like, I don't know anything. I've never talked about Ireland. I've never done anything for. I mean, it's great, but I'm like, how did that happen? So yeah.
Two Irish guys. I'm part Irish. I'm 40% Irish. So two Irish guys were sitting around having a pint, and they said, "Hey, look at this."
Yeah, that's right. Let's do something with this. So yeah, that was just recently. We probably one of the most interesting things early on that happened was I got contacted at the time. I don't think it's even in existence anymore. There was a website called now.com, and this would have been before 2003. This is probably around 2002, maybe 2001.
Way back.
Now.com, and they were an up-and-coming, they wanted to be an online magazine, was their thing. And I got interviewed, and they're in Great Britain, and I got interviewed by them. And so then the time difference and everything, so I got up at like 4 a.m. or something to do an interview back at that day with this now.com. And so we were, did that. And it was one of those things where like, wow, this is really weird. Never would have expected that to happen ever. And then it didn't. I'm like, well, this is interesting. So yeah, I mean, it just shows you the power of, putting things out there that's searchable.
Well, the power. I think it's the power of the voice, and the fact that I think we brought up earlier a few things about the fact the growth of AI, the growth of the internet, the growth of the opportunity for us to have conversations like this with digital media, streaming services, and everything. It has become mainstream that this is more of a norm. If you don't have a webcam, you don't have a computer, then you're like either really. And I don't mean this in any offense, but you're either really, really, really old and you don't want to mess with it,
right?
And or you're not old enough yet to really get onto it yourself. But at the same time, I've watched kids walk around that are 5 and 6 years old that are whipping through an iPad like it was yesterday.
Oh yeah, because you grow up with it, it becomes second nature.
Second nature to it.
The one thing though that for me at least that I find, I wouldn't say alarming or anything, but I find interesting is, so the kids that you see doing that, they don't necessarily know how it works. And so I grew up with technology. I was very young when I got a computer myself, and learned some modest programming. I'm not a programmer by profession or anything, but some modest programming, and just doing different things on the computer and kind of having an idea how not everything works, but how it works is a general thing. Kind of like if you talk to a car person, right? They know how a car works, but they don't necessarily know how to fix it because they're not a mechanic. In that kind of vein. But then it's like my children, my kids. My daughter has no interest whatsoever in any of this. She just wants what it does for her. She doesn't want to know how it works, as long as it does it for her. And I think that's interesting, because then I think we're moving past the point where in the past you would if you wanted to, even a webcam in the past, you would have to figure out your IRC channels and all this kind of stuff to make it work. Where nowadays it just works.
Yeah, yeah.
On the phone it
It's
just
just
works. On the
push of a
tablet it just
button.
works.
Push of
Yeah,
a button.
and so yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of a lost art of doing, working with these things. Not that you have to know everything. It's just when I was younger, my dad was like, you're gonna learn how to change the oil, change a tire, right, and also change the battery, and all these kind of maintenance things, right,
Yeah.
that were normal maintenance for a car. And he made me, I was not interested. I'm not interested in cars personally, but he had me do all that, because he's like, you're going to be somewhere and you're going to need to know this at some point in time, and you need to know kind of a vague idea of what's going on, and belts and things, and here's what this does, here's what that does, so that you can live in the
Figure it out.
world and not break down and be break down in the middle of the desert
Stranded.
perhaps.
Yeah, stranded.
Yeah, and be stranded. You can take some pantyhose and make a serpentine belt to get your car running a little ways till you can get somewhere or something. But that's the kind of thing that we don't really have so much in the computer world. I don't know that we necessarily need it, but I do find it interesting.
I think I got a funny story for you now. See, it along that same line. I taught both my daughters the same thing. I taught them to change tire. I taught them to change the oil, to look at the oil, to check the oil,
Mhm.
check your fluids, everything that I could about a car that they could get away with that without getting hurt, so that if
Mhm.
they ever needed it. So our youngest daughter was dating a guy, and he got a flat tire. He had no idea what to do with a flat tire. He says, "Who do I call? I need to call somebody. Who do I call?" Dickie said, "We'll just change it." And he said, "I don't know how to change it." I mean, and she says, "I do." He says, "You know how to?" And he got mad because
Mhm.
she knew how to change a tire and was changing it for him, and he didn't know
Mhm.
because his dad never taught him.
Yeah, and you say that is hilarious, because my daughter, she did with her boyfriend one time, did the same thing. She changed the tire. He didn't know where the jack was, where
Yeah,
to take the lug bar,
the lug nuts off
and
and
she did it, and she wouldn't. He goes, "You cannot tell my dad that you changed my tire,"
the.
because he'd be furious with me. But yeah, because I mean, I wasn't as extensive with my daughter as my father was with me, but I did. Yeah, we went over those things from, like, here's what you do, but I don't know. It's a little bit of life skills, I suppose you could call it that.
I call
Yeah,
life skills. I mean, yeah, even
yeah.
like our kids were young, we started them on. I've had a computer since as early back as they came out. In fact, my
Mhm.
first computer was an IBM, and it was a whopping 10 megahertz speed
Was
floppy
it a
drive.
PC Junior? Which kind of IBM was it?
I want
Do
to
you
be honest with
remember?
you. I it was so far back. I don't. Let me see. 19.
I don't remember when PC Junior is the earliest IBM name that I can think of.
I
So
don't. It might not have been a junior. All I know is it was. The case itself was probably. I'm looking down like you can see the fingers. The case itself was probably maybe 18 inches wide, and it
Mhm.
was maybe 9 or 10 inches tall. And they had a the monitor
Right,
sat
the old
on top of
monitors.
it.
Yeah.
The floppy drive. It cost me an enormous amount of money, but
Mhm.
I had friends of mine that had a Commodore 64.
Oh yeah, Commodore
Remember
64,
those?
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I eventually ended up getting. I was indoctrinated into computers early on because of the police department. So
Right.
when I went to the police department in the beginning, we didn't actually have computers to like type up reports and everything, but we had the NCIS, National Crime
Mhm.
Information Center computers that were in dispatch, and the CCI, the Colorado Crime and Information uh, System. So I got indoctrinated to it, not indoctrinated, educated with it early on with that. And it's like
Mhm.
fascinated with it. I got more. Let me go back. I'm going to be a Star Trek nerd here in a minute. Going back to Star Trek, I remember watching Star Trek and going, I want one of those. If you watch Star Trek and you watch as even it progressed with Star Trek Next Generation and all the rest of
Mhm.
those, before an iPad was in anybody's hand, they were walking
Right.
around
Yeah.
with an iPad.
Right. Yeah. They had it was like black with like little lights on the top.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
walking around with an
Mhm.
iPad. So
Mhm.
I got fascinated really early along with that. So I kind of grew with it. At the same time, same thing with my kids. I got them to learn typing from the age of probably 8, 9, 10 years old, how to use a
Mhm.
typewriter. But my father was a journalist. So
Mhm.
I was taught how to use a typewriter at a very early age. And
Mhm.
I taught them how to type. I put a little program. So when we evolved with computers, they used to have computer programs that teach you to type. So
Yeah, the old
they
Mavis Beacon program was the big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so they got to learn to type on that, and they kind of progressed with computers as we did. I eventually walked away from the PCs, and I get into Mac. My first Mac was an Apple II, when it first
Okay.
came out, like 1984, something like that. It was an Apple
Mhm.
II. I wish I'd have
82,
kept
I
it.
think. Yeah.
82, yeah. I wish I'd
That's
have
my
kept it.
guess. 84 was the Macintosh, so I'm guessing it's probably around 82 or something.
Yeah, somewhere or thereabouts. So yeah, so I had an Apple II, which I saw one the early part of this year. I saw one auctioned off for something like $156,000.
Right. Yeah.
Could have been mine
Right.
because I gave it
Yeah.
away. But it is. I think this is part of society these days. It's just the way we talk about society and culture. I think society has become an instant gratification type system. And I think that's why
Mhm.
podcasting and so forth has been adapted to society so well because I get instant information. I'm instantly inspired. I'm instantly motivated. I'm instantly entertained.
Mhm.
Instantly educated. Google, what's the first thing we do now when we're looking for something? We want instant gratification. We go to Google.
Right. Yeah.
How
Go
do I
to
do
Google.
this? And you can get a how-to video in a heartbeat
Yeah.
to do something. So yeah, it's where you were at the foundation of even podcasting from that perspective. It's amazing that you have endured, not from a negative perspective. I mean, it's amazing that you've endured for 20,
Why are you still here? That's the question. Yeah. What are you doing?
well, you're still here. I mean, you've watched it evolve. You yourself have watched it evolve
Oh
from the
yeah. So
beginning
many
stages to
changes.
where it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazingly how much, and then you know, to be honest, I think it's been a big leap the last few years, and I think COVID was the
Catalyst.
catalyst for all that because everybody had a little more time on their hands
Yeah.
maybe than they had in the past, and then also the opening up of all these distance applications, which were the funny thing is they were all not in the same branding and the same
Yeah.
mechanism, but they were all already there. I mean, Skype has been around, gosh, for quite some time. I can tell you,
Yeah.
it's probably the early I probably was on Skype. I'm trying to think. I want to say 2009. I may be wrong on that. Maybe it's more in the 2010s, but it's been a long time
Been a
since
while.
I used Skype, and this is obviously fancier than Skype was, but the idea of it was the same. Jetson style video calling of
Yeah.
sorts. So yeah.
And we never thought that would ever exist. I mean, look at the what is it?
Mhm.
Facebook has got one where you can call each other.
Mhm. Yeah.
I haven't seen a commercial for a while now, so maybe they just continued it. But you could literally call back and forth and talk to grandma, grandpa, or mom and dad, or
Right. Yeah. They had
kids.
the little appliance that they were trying to push for a while,
Yeah, it's kind of
and it
crazy.
all goes through Facebook. Yeah. Exactly. It's but because of the pandemic, it kind of everybody just kind
Mm.
of for whatever reason like their head turned over in that direction, and it's like, oh yeah, this is neat. Where
Yeah.
before they really weren't paying attention. So.
Well, I think the COVID was a double-edged sword. That whole situation. I think it changed lifestyles completely in regard
Mhm.
to that. I know that my wife was able to work from home for about 2.5 years, and
Mhm.
they did all of their meetings. She works for the state, but she works in a continuing education department where they in an environment that they have to continue to recertify. So you have to have so many
Mhm.
hours of
Sure.
education each year, this kind of a thing. So they put everything online and went on Zoom and watch even
Mhm.
Zoom. I think accelerated during that time period because in
Yeah.
the beginning of Zoom, it was sketchy. It was like Skype.
Right.
Sometimes you had great
Right.
connection, sometimes you didn't.
Sometimes you didn't. Yeah.
A- And,
Yeah.
and they had to evolve themselves because everybody went, how are we going to do this meeting with everybody? Everybody got on
Mhm.
Skype, which
Mhm.
obviously that has its issue. Well, not issues, but there's been some funny things happen with that too because of
Right. Yeah.
technology. But the
There's yeah.
lawyer,
I don't know. I've seen more people in their underwear since Zoom came into the landscape than that I didn't want to see than I've ever seen before. Yeah, people in the background normally. There's always just like people set up for whatever. Like you have a nice people are doing more virtual backgrounds like you've got, but at the beginning, before the virtual backgrounds were kind of a mainstay,
yeah.
for whatever reason, they would set up in the corner of their house where you could see everything down the hallway, and then there'd be people walking around. And I'm always like,
Uh,
don't you watch? Look at where your camera view is here. So
or they do
yeah.
it with a filter, like the famous lawyer that turned into a
Oh,
cat.
right.
But
Exactly. Yeah.
Your
With
Honor, I'm not really a
the
cat.
appliances. Yeah. Where they pop on their face and everything now. Yeah. It's well. See, yeah. I'm got it kind of leads to my little character right here. So this is an avatar that I put together for a different project totally, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, just ahead of COVID, I think. And I wanted to animate our show. And so I created this and I created one for Miles. And you can kind of see off to the edge of the screen, there's like a little orange lightning bolt thing. And he would normally be on the other side of that. You can see a little bit of a green something or another over there. That's a lounge, like a lazy boy chair. And his character would be sitting in a lazy boy, and I did animate it, but the problem was he did not have the processing capabilities that I have, and so it was all done in post production. So I'd have to do it all after the fact, and I did it for several months, and then I went on vacation, and when I came back, I'm like, that's too much work. I'm not doing that anymore. And then I've been using it since then to do these interviews because I have a setup where basically it's moving the mouth of the character for the most part to what I'm saying, and I can move my head and raise my eyebrows and all kinds of good stuff. But I think this is going to be become more commonplace for folks because Zoom is integrating it. I think Teams has got it integrated now, where you can kind of be an avatar of some kind. I don't think a lot of people are using it yet, but something will happen. It'll all kind of come together. We'll see.
That
But
was a
yeah.
that was a question I really was going to ask you. So you've kind
Oh,
of
sure.
anticipated
Did
my
I answer it or no?
you read my mind.
Oh, okay.
Because I'll tell you, I've done 340 some odd interviews,
Mhm.
somewhere thereabouts. Because I've done there's 322 up on the platform, but I've got more that have been banked.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, this is the first time I've ever had one with an avatar.
Yeah. Well, I try to be as inviting as possible so that you don't feel ridiculous whenever you're like, well, I'm just talking to this cartoon. But I do, try to be interactive with my vocal style here. So
Yeah,
it's a little bit less put offish that way.
it works. It works. Like I say, it is unique, and unique is always good in this environment, as we know. And I think that it presents well. I think we're having a regular, normal conversation, and didn't give it a second thought. I mean, the blue skin's a little,
Yeah, a little
different than
different.
mine, but I don't really live in a, I don't really live in one of what's behind me. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, for me, it's just that I'm still employed, right? So I still have a regular job and so forth, and we've always kind of been, you know, the show is a bit of our personality plus, if you want to do it that way. So in daily life, if you were to encounter me, I'm really quite a quiet person. And unless I knew you, I probably wouldn't talk to you, and I would be, just like a regular person on the street where you don't interact with them that much, and so forth. And in fact, I almost avoid interactions lots of times out in the real world. And so then, but on the show, then it's I'm myself plus, so it's a little bit more personality to it, a little bit more,
extrovert.
fun stuff. Yeah, a little more. But personally, I'm quite introverted, and so then the character helps me be my
Convert.
extrovert,
Convert.
where I'm not as comfortable personally. So yeah, it's a little bit of show, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So
Well, that works. Well, like I told you, this is the first for me, so it's all good. Everything is good.
yeah,
You
I'm
know,
glad
my
it's going well.
my conversations, I have open and honest conversations, and I'm here to inspire, educate, and motivate people and entertain people, just like you are. And the
Yeah.
whole reality of this is the epitome of digital media. I have a master's degree in digital media, so from that perspective, I appreciate what you're doing. I admire
Oh,
the fact
cool.
of what you've created there because I understand it from that perspective. I
Yeah,
love
and it's
digital
also
media.
for me. I'd love to experiment. That's what this whole the whole reason we're talking is because of experimentation. It's like, hey, we can put audio on the internet. Hey, we can do this. Hey, we can do that.
Yeah.
And that's my thing is I'm always kind of looking at something and I'm like, what could I, is this look like it would be fun for me personally? I'm always, it really is a kind of a selfish pursuit in a way because I'm always looking to do something that I think is fun and interesting. And then if others do, that's great. But if they don't, to be honest with you, I'll do it anyway. And we just move forward. I'm always
Exactly.
looking at the next thing. So
Have fun
who
anyway.
knows where it goes next? I don't know.
What I know that talking about introvert, extrovert, and in this kind of thing, I know that you had sent me some notes in regard to you've had some paranormal experiences.
Oh
Can we
yeah, yeah.
can,
So
can we
that's
can we delve into that just a little?
yeah.
I
No,
like
no problem. I had
ghosts and goblins.
if you want to hear about it. So I don't. I'm very interested in that as a topic, and I've never really. I mean, this is not a normal occurrence for me to have an experience, but I have had an experience which was really weird, and I haven't really had any since then that I would say I would say totally. I had actually did a story about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, which I'll tell you in a minute. But first, the big one that was really kind of an in your face kind of a different experience that certainly wasn't normal was so in 2019 my house burnt down and had a fire. And then my family, we had to go live someplace else while everything happened, and it takes a while to do that. It took about a year, I think, before we could move back in to the house because it had to get rebuilt and stuff like that. And so at first we were living in a hotel, and then after we couldn't maintain that because and everybody thinks, oh, insurance will take care of it. Well, insurance is finite, and so then we had to move into a house because it was going to be much cheaper than paying the rate at the hotel, and plus we knew it was going to take longer to get everything done. So we lived in a hotel for a while and didn't have any belongings. Unfortunately, I didn't get to have a fun adventure with melting televisions. So we moved from the hotel into this house. Now, it's not like a haunted house or anything. This was like a late 90s, early 2000s, house in a neighborhood, like any typical suburban type neighborhood. It was actually on a golf course we weren't on the golf course. We were on the houses off the golf course, but across the street was the houses on the golf course or a street over or something. And so we moved in there with nothing. And my wife coordinated everything so that Amazon would deliver bed frames for us all and mattresses. And so the first day we arrived at the house from the hotel, we sat on the floor until the Amazon truck came by and dumped off mattresses and bed frames that I had to put together. And so I put them all together, and within the first week we were there, everybody's exhausted still. We're still not that far away from the whole kind of incident with the fire and everything. This is pre pandemic, so I'm having to work and everybody's having to do their thing. Well, in the one night early on there, I wake up at probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning. I didn't look at the clock, but it was in the middle of the night, and I see a shadow that appears to be on the window shades. So the house didn't have curtains; it just had like blinds. And so I see the shadow. Well, I'm like looking at it, and I'm thinking, this is weird. The shadow, and I was assuming we had moved in, and it was very hard to find a place to live at that point in time where I'm at, and I was assuming it was the neighbor who was kind of like a used car salesman type of guy. He was all like, a little bit in your business and a little bit big, kind of a big personality. And I thought, well, that weird used car neighbor guy is standing outside looking in our window. And
like
I
all
was so
used car
tired.
guys.
Yeah, like all used car. I tried to think of a way to explain what he was like, but the only thing I could think of was used car, because he was always like, hey, how you doing? And so, but I was really, exhausted. You're just kind of not only physically but emotionally exhausted from all these events. And so I go back to sleep, and then the next day, I'm talking to my son, who was a teenager at the time. And he goes, Dad, I got to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Now, we had gotten him in the hotel. We had gotten him like I think it was a PS5 or something like that. And I had a television delivered when we moved in. And so he was playing video games because we're trying to give him something to do, because literally everything, he lost everything. And it was a pretty depressing time for the kid. And he's like, I was up playing games last night, and a shadow walked into my room and tried to grab my leg. So, yeah. And I'm like, what? And I didn't tell him at this point in time. I didn't tell him that I had saw this shadow, like it seemed to be looking in the window, right? And being a father, and I'm thinking, we just moved into this house, within days. And I can't have this kid freaked out to live in this house. So I'm not going to tell him that I saw a shadow, right? And I'm going to
Excuse me.
play this off because there's nowhere else to go. We're still having, even when you have a fire, you still have
Yeah,
to pay your house payment if you have one. And we don't have to pay rent, but it's not like you can just, all of a sudden decide, yeah, I'm going to move to another place after I've signed, they don't sign the lease. You sign the lease and they give you the money. And so you're on the hook no matter what. And if they decide not to give you the
yeah.
money, then you're SOL. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm sure you're just tired. I basically lied to the kid. I'm sure you're just tired, And meanwhile, in the back of my head, I'm like, holy moly, I didn't see it. I saw this thing that he saw, right? And so I'm like, just tell me if anything else happens, I'm sure we'll be good. Well, so I didn't tell my wife either because I knew she'd be freaked out as well. So I'm holding the
Like,
secret at this point, and we continue living there, and we end up getting a dog because we had had pets prior that all passed away, and everybody was down, and so there's nothing better than a dog to get everybody happy again. At least that's what you
exactly.
think at the time. But so we get this dog, and it's going well, and then and the basement was unfinished, but it was a full basement and just concrete and walls and the furnace and stuff like that. So we would go downstairs to play with the dog and throw like a tennis ball around, and he would chase it around. Well, he would not go into one corner of the basement. He would
Ooh,
chase the ball everywhere else in the basement, but in the far kind of this back corner, if the ball like bounced around and landed there, he wouldn't go get it. Anywhere else, he would go get it, and then you'd have to go get it and start over again, and he would just go crazy chasing this ball around. And I thought that is really
that's
peculiar.
crazy. Yeah.
Then my wife tells me I'm hearing these noises down in the basement. So, and there's nothing down there. And the dog doesn't stay down there or anything. He stays upstairs with us for most of the time. She's telling me, yeah, it's like there's weird like noises down in the basement I'm hearing. I'm like, oh, I'm sure it's the pipes or whatever, you know. And then so that continues on while we're staying there. And then my son comes back to me and he says, I saw this shadow thing walking from, there was like a garage, and you'd go from the garage through like a mud room into the kitchen. He was up getting something out of the kitchen in the middle of the night. He sees this thing walking around the house.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And like I said, this is not like an old house or anything like that. This is like a suburban, nice suburban house, right? And so we had a few more. He had a few more. I never did see the shadow again. My wife never saw the shadow. She just heard things. And then my son would be the one. He saw it a couple more times. But then after a while, everything kind of settled down after we'd been there for a couple months.
That's
And the
crazy.
dog still wouldn't go get the ball, but at least there wasn't noises or anything. So, um, but we were there for almost a year exactly.
Wow.
And then we come to find out that this, I don't know if this is just circumstantial or not, but this house, um, no one had lived there more than a year. So we leave, and then the people decide to sell the house who owned it. We were just renting. People buy it, they live there for a year and then sell it. And then the next people live there for, as far as I know, just a year and sell it. And then I've kind of lost track because we were moved away
That's
and
crazy.
back to our thing. So yeah, it's just the most bizarre thing. So there was this some weird thing. So if you were to look it up in kind of the vernacular of the
Yeah.
paranormal, it would be called a shadow person, right? So we experienced the shadow person while we were living there, which again I've never had that experience, and then I've never had a shadow person experience since then. So
Did
only
you
at this one place.
did you ever do any history check on the house to find out if anybody? And this sounds morbid, but
Right?
trust
Anybody
me,
died or anything?
anybody died
No,
there, anybody suicide there, murdered there.
no, I didn't. No, the weird thing was, so the house is near an Air Force base, and somebody who was in the Air Force owned it during the time that we were there. But they would go off on duty or whatever, right? So they were
Yeah.
gone, and then they would rent it out apparently, and then they sold it after we left. But yeah, it was. but no, as far as I know, I think they had bought it fairly new because this was like a development that kind of served that
Uh,
clientele, right? Because it was close to the Air
right.
Force Base. And so, as far as I know, I didn't, but I didn't look into it. At that point, I was at the time we were there. I was so freaked out because I was trying to just, as you would do as a parent and so forth, trying to hold everybody
Yeah.
together because
Don't
you've
tell
gone
don't
through
tell the
something
kids
that
there's a
was.
ghost in the basement.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Because you're not, you can't move, right? You can't do anything about it other than deal with it. And so I didn't want to freak everybody out. So I don't think I even told my wife until we moved out. And she was really mad at me because I didn't. But I'm like, you have to understand, I can't have, everybody's already depressed and everything else. I'm like, I can't have you all freaking out about this. Um, and she was certainly mad at me whenever I said I woke up and I saw this thing and then I went back to sleep. She's like, you didn't even wake me up. I'm like, no, I was.
Why am I in the doghouse? You didn't tell me about the dead guy walking
Yeah,
around the house.
yeah. So who knows? I don't know what it was, but obviously it was not. It was innocuous, other than the one incident my son described, and it just kind of lived there with us. I'm assuming. I mean, like I didn't get to see it again. So
And most than likely, since you guys just kind of didn't get scared off right away, I'm sure that whoever it was or whatever it was still kind of hanging out there. Figured
yeah,
that he wasn't doing anything to get rid of you so quickly, so he kind of
right.
just settled
Yeah.
down. He it,
I guess. I
he
guess.
she it.
Now the only other thing that's really happened to me is just recently. I was at I for work I have to travel a bit less now than I did because of all the changes. But I was in a hotel and I swear I was going to sleep and I swear somebody burped in my ear. I actually told the story on our show. I mean, like a belch, like
Wow.
something really loud. And I looked around and nothing, but I was on a corner room, so there was two corners exposed to the hallway for so maybe they were out in the hallway, just burped really loud, and I heard it, but it sounded like it was right up against my head almost.
Wow, that's
And
crazy.
so I kind of shook it off, and I had to get some sleep because I had to do stuff the next day. And then the next day, I had because it's nice outside. I just wore sandals to get there, comfortable clothes,
Yeah.
and then I had to wear dress clothes the next day. And so I had a bag with my dress shoes in the morning. I switched out my dress shoes out of the bag with my sandals because I was not gonna. I had to pack them up in the car because I was just there for the day. And I went to do something, and I came back to my room. My sandals were on the floor. They were laying on the bed in a bag, and they were on the floor in that room after I'd heard the burp thing. So I don't know if that was anything or not. I didn't see anything. I just had these two really weird, random experiences. And these weren't, I didn't place the shoes on the edge of the bed. If you go to the hotel, you got they put that kind of fake comforter thing at the bottom,
Yeah.
to make it look nice. It was on the middle of that. So that's towards the bottom of the bed, but not, on the bottom
On
of the
the
bed. And they're
edge, yeah,
laying
where
down.
it was
So,
slid off.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty cool.
my haunted hotel room
Well, I tell you,
story, but
as a cop, I can tell you that there are more things that happen in hotels and motels than you would
yeah.
ever know about. It is
Oh,
that's why
yeah.
I don't. When my wife and I travel, we don't stay in motels.
Where do
Um,
you stay at then?
well, we stay in hotels, but I very
Oh,
rarely
okay.
stay. Will stay in motels because the
Gotcha.
majority of motels, a lot of times, are one night things. A
Right.
lot of times, people, if I'm going to say this out loud, but I can say this out loud because it's the truth. In my experience, I lived and worked in a community that we had in my district. There were like 30 motels. Okay, I can tell you that there were suicides, murders, major assaults, um, unattended deaths, overdoses, drownings in the hot tubs, things like this.
Mhm. Oh,
So,
yeah.
you know, they're and they're prevalent within motels because people
Mhm.
think that I'll just go to a motel, they'll clean it up. especially with suicides.
Right. Well, because
They
they
go,
got to
well,
rent that room. They always need that space.
they'll rent the
Well,
room and it, yeah.
I had a wild experience at a very fairly nice hotel a number of years ago. This had been probably in the 90s. I was at this event near the airport in St. Louis at the Marriott, and a lady came up to me and told me there was a bomb in the building.
Well, then,
That matter of fact, just walks up to me, nose to nose almost, and says, "Hey, there's a bomb in this building," and then she took off.
thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Yeah, and so I contacted they had a hotel detective. So I got the hotel detective, and this was prior to this. Like I said, this was prior to like Timothy McVeigh kind of situations
Yeah.
and so forth. And so he comes, and I'm like, "You got any cameras? You want to roll them back? I'll tell you what she looks like." And he didn't really do much about it at the time because there wasn't the kind of the same environment that we're in now. But that was probably one of the strangest
That is
encounters
really
I've had.
strange. It didn't blow
Yeah.
up, so
No, we all stayed in there. I got
so
lunch. It was all good.
so it's always a good day when you don't get blown up.
That's right. But I'm like, that is the most bizarre. I mean, what would even possess a person to do that? You know what I mean? So,
Somebody just a
um,
little off, or just wanted to try to mess with somebody's day, I guess.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Well, like I said, I travel, so there's lots of weird stories. Not murderous stories, but just weird happenings and happenstances, and people
Society.
like that. Yeah, it's just bizarre.
Yeah, if it's interesting, the one thing that during my long career in law enforcement that I got to see were the individuals that come out after dark are completely different than the ones that come out during the daytime. But sometimes the
Right?
ones that come
Yeah.
out after dark sneak into the daytime. So
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful, 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 wonderful. Hey, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I'm so happy that we were able to connect and we're sitting here, semi face to face. The I have to say semi, but I know that I've listened to Static Radio. I think everybody else should listen to Static Radio. You guys have a wonderful program. It's some brilliant conversations, and if somebody wanted to do that, how'd they find you?
Well, they can always find us at staticradio.com. Actually, we've got at this point I've accumulated .com, .net, and .org just to be thorough, apparently. And if you want to find us on the socials, pretty much if you look up Static Radio on any of the socials, you'll find us there.
And I'll make sure that all that stuff's in the link in the show notes and so forth so that it's easy for somebody just to press the little button, as we were talking about earlier. It'll take them right to it. So I appreciate that. Um, Bob, you're a legend in this industry. Like I said, it's kind of like as a podcaster, you're kind of like my grandfather because you were at the start.
Uh, I'm glad you're doing well, Michael. We hope the best for you.
Boy, thank you. See, there's a little Irish coming out in you right there.
That's right, exactly.
Maybe that's why they're listening to you in Ireland. It slips out every once in a while.
That's right. A little bit of a lilt,
A little, just a wee bit, just a wee
just a
bit.
wee bit.
Well, you're a true legend in this business. I really appreciate you. Thank you for embarking on this journey and bringing it to where you have and presenting to the world an outlet for some laughs, for some inspiration, for some education, and some brilliant entertainment. So, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you very much. Hopefully, we can do this again. Maybe we can revisit another one in the next, maybe next year.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Fantastic. For everybody else that's out there, please, I'll make sure that the links are in there for you to get a hold of staticradio.com. Again, take a listen to it, watch it, listen to it, play with it. You'll love it. And one more thing before you all go. Oh, wait a minute, Bob. I always ask this. Why I messed up?
What's wrong?
I missed my cue. This is one more thing before you go. So before we go, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to give anybody else coming up in this industry or about life in general?
Oh, sure. Actually, I think it's one and the same, which is, be yourself and do the things you like, and sometimes people like them too.
Brilliant. Brilliant words of wisdom. I'm so glad I remembered to put that in there. So now we'll say, for everybody else that's out there listening and watching, thank you very much for joining us on the show. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Bob, thank you again. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Have a great week. And thank you for listening.
See you later. See you
Thanks
later.
for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.